Not only was my mother my first adversary and first competitor, in retrospect, she was also my first abusive relationship and pimp. Adversarial, competitive, abusive, pimp. All key phrases which will come to define most all of my interpersonal relationships into adulthood. From birth, my mother was jealous of the relationship between my father and I, admitting aloud that no matter how evil and abusive he was towards her, that he was never that way towards me. And that even when she was planning to escape, she nearly considered leaving me with him, which I am pretty sure would not have ended well. You see, my father had been triangulating my mother against me and other women from early on. And in actuality, it was more of a projection of his own insecurities. You see, my father was a pimp and my mother was his bottom bitch. And in many ways, that is who she would forever remain, a bottom bitch. Growing up, I would see my mother with an array of men. Her type was money. Therefore, she had no type and would often find herself in situations which would more than likely label her as a mistress. Bad in and with of itself, but worse when you bring innocent children into the equation. That is when your character comes into question. But see, my mother had no character, neither guilt, shame, morals, ethics, or even principles. She would bring us around strange men as kids, and we were required to perform the role of a happy family, no matter how interchangeable the father role might have been. Training us from the earliest of years to be just as money-grubbing, opportunistic, and selfish as she was. If my mother was my first teacher, one of the first lessons was to not only sell myself out for men, but to do so toward other women as well. By involving us as kids in such filthy and sinful behavior, I am utterly convinced that she was outright or indirectly offering us to these men had they ever grown tired of her. One of her married boyfriends actually told me that he wasn't fully satisfied with her simply because she would not suck his Peter Johnson.
If you had 100,000.
I was around 9 years old at the time, and in time, that same someone will begin to visit my bedroom in the middle of the night for prolonged periods of time, right after intimacy with my mom. But see, as an adult now with an adult mind, I can't help but wonder, where was my mother, especially with 2 girl children and a man roaming around? Why was he able to roam freely in the middle of the night? You see, my mother was far too calculating and controlling to not know exactly what was going on, to not only know, but be complicit. Maybe not even be complicit, but to have had her feet. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mother and brother are the only ones who truly remember the wrath and rage of my father. And so, in many ways, each of them blamed and took it out on my sister and I. As a baby even, people used to think that my now transsexual brother was a girl, calling into question whether a child can be born gay or not. I'm just going to go ahead and say the quiet part out loud, that my brother was not born gay, but was more than likely abused as a toddler or an infant by my bisexual father. Hence, violating my sister and I as girls later on in life. He was also verbally and mentally abusive towards us as well, just as my father had been towards our mother. My brother is a Scorpio, a sign which never forgets past transgressions. So in his mind, if he couldn't get our father back, he took it out on his seeds, and still blames my sister and I for something our father did to him, which he will never admit to or make amends with.